Now in the last video I said that one thing that we could do in order to increase the amount of money that farmers make is to just simply declare that the farmers are going to get a higher price for their goods. And the issue with that is, right here on the screen, it causes a surplus. And something has to be done with that surplus. You just don't wave a magic wand and get rid of the surplus. In the last video I said that one scheme for taking care of that surplus was for the government to just buy it up. And I briefly talked about how we set that up using a thing called a non-recourse marketing loan. So let me scroll down here, see if I can scroll. Oh yeah, I can scroll down. How neat is that? And I'm gonna, let's see, let's grab a color here. Let's go back to the white because it stands out good in contrast. And I'm gonna show you the second scheme. And the second scheme is what I like to call cut a check. For the difference. There's another scheme we'll talk about later that I like to call cutting a check. That's very different than cutting a check for the difference. So here's our setup. We have a demand curve. We have a supply curve. We've got a quantity. We've got a price. And we have an equilibrium, PE. Positive economics, right? Supply curve and demand curve cross. Where they cross, that's the equilibrium. That leads to a market price and a market quantity. Facts, right? Economic rules, right? Now we take a shift and we start practicing normative economics, and we say the equilibrium price should be higher. Farmers should get more money for their crop. And whether they should or not is not up for me to determine as an economist. My job is to practice positive economics and say what are the consequences of that decision, good or bad. And so this time we're going to say there's the price here that we think farmers should, normative economics, receive for their crop. And we're going to give it a special name. We're going to call it PT. The T stands for target. So PT is equal to the target price. And here's the way this works. The policy says to the farmer, all right, farmer, we think you deserve PT for your crop. And what we're going to do is we're going to guarantee that you get PT for your crop. No matter what happens, we promise you that is the amount of money you're going to receive for your crop. And so what the farmer does is the farmer looks at that and says, hot dog, I'm going to make that for my crop. So I'm going to take this dotted line out here to the supply curve, and I'm going to say, when the price is PT, I want to produce QS. I'm just going to follow the law of supply. If I know I can get more money for my crop, I'm much more excited about buying fertilizer and growing more. I'm much more excited about renting out extra farmland and having more land to farm because I know I'm going to get a higher price for my crop. And hey, it cuts out a lot of the risk because the government said they're going to take care of me. They're going to make sure it happens. Now, the problem we've run into before is this creates a surplus. What if, instead of creating a surplus, we just said to the farmer, we promise you you'll receive PT for your crop. When your crop is harvested, go sell it. Get whatever you can for the crop. Now, the bureaucrats had to figure out what that means, and that oftentimes means calculating a marketing year average, calculating a price locally that the typical farmer gets, that kind of thing, right? Because in essence now, the farmer doesn't actually care what the farmer sells the corn for at this point because the government has said you are going to get the happy price for your corn no matter what happens. So here's what happens. We realize that we've made QS. Now we have to figure out a way to make sure that the people who are going to use this corn are going to buy QS so that QS and QD are the same money, or the same amount. It's almost like we're trying to make an artificial equilibrium that's out here at this higher quantity. And what we have to do now is figure out what price will clear the market, or what price will convince the consumer, the demander, the person making ethanol, the person feeding corn to their cows, what price will convince them to buy all of this stuff here that was produced. How do we clear the market and make the quantity supplied equal to the quantity demanded? And that's an easy thing to do. We go up from the QS up to the demand curve because that's the quantity that we want to see demanded. And we draw a dotted line over and we label this, I'm going to call it PM, where the M stands for market. It's not the best thing to call it because it's not really the market price. The equilibrium price should be the market price. Rather, it's the price that clears the market. This is the price that will convince the consumer to buy it. So PM is the market clearing price. This is the price that will convince people to buy up all the corn that was produced. Now, do you see a problem? Okay. Our farmer was promised that they would receive PT. They only received PM. The difference between that number, the difference between those numbers is how deficient our farmers ended up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give the farmer that difference. We're going to look at PT. We're going to subtract it PM, what the farmer probably could have received for their crop. Not the equilibrium price, different price. And remember, the bureaucrats kick in here and we end up with this complicated scheme for figuring out what PM actually is. It's usually based on county level averages or something like that. And the difference, we're going to call that the DP, which stands for deficiency payment. So this is the deficiency payment, DEFICIENCY payment. Deficiency payment. Let's go back up here and take a look at this again. Oh, I turned a page and won't let me go back up. So if we were to go back, let's see if I can go back this way, and look at our diagram, and look at the difference between these two prices. The difference between those two prices is our deficiency payment. So what ends up happening here is instead of buying up surplus grain and storing it and just kind of hoping that things will work out, the farmer gets to go out and sell their grain on the open market. So we have something that looks a lot more like a market economy, and the government just basically says, here's how much you're deficient, let me make that up to you here. And they end up, like I said here, cutting a check for the difference. Now the size of the deficiency payment is going to be, or the size of the check is going to be the deficiency payment multiplied by the amount of crop that the farmer produced. And how we define that has actually never been the actual amount the farmer produced. There was a big bureaucratic step to figuring that out as well. And that's part of what we're going to study when we get diving into kind of the history of this. Now in the next couple of videos, we're going to be using what we learned before when we started talking about producer and consumer surplus in order to analyze how these payments work to try to get a handle on what it cost to implement these policies. So make sure you stay tuned. You can hit the subscribe button. That way if there's an update, you can see it before anybody else will, and I will catch you in the next video.